Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your co-host, Rachel Cove. I am the owner of Transformational Solutions, a life coaching business that specializes in addiction, trauma, and self-destructive behaviors. I'm an author, podcast host, group facilitator, speaker, and co-creator of the online 8-week self-development course, the Visions Program.
I'm your co-host, Arthur Mogilevsky, a business entrepreneur, dad, animal activist, and owner of AM Healthcare, California's leading dual diagnosis and mental health treatment centers, focusing on comprehensive and immersive treatment experiences with a network of facilities and dedicated professionals committed to providing each and every client the intimacy of care they so richly deserve.
This is the Got Mental Health Podcast, a fun, open, and safe space where we talk to experts, thought leaders, and professionals in the mental health field.
Our goal is to educate, inspire, and empower people to take care of their mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being.
Join us weekly to hear Arthur talk like this as we talk all things mental health.
Follow us wherever you go to get your podcasts.
And don't forget to rate and review as it really supports our show.
Thanks, guys.
And keep listening to Arthur. Welcome, everyone, to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your host, Rachel Cove, along with my co-host, Arthur Skiski.
It's a Mogilevsky, Rachel.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. Today, we have a host that I am so excited to interview, Miss Candy Finnigan. You might recognize her from the A&E show Intervention. She speaks all over the country. She is a recovery and placement specialist, as well as an addiction specialist, and amongst many other things, a wonderful mother. And I just can't wait to talk to you today.
I wouldn't go so
very
far
exciting.
as a wonderful mother.
Well, you're a mother. I feel like as mothers, we're
I
wonderful.
am a mother.
A
You're a
mother.
That's
mother.
for sure.
Wonderful.
That's for sure.
Well, I mean, I feel like we have like a million questions,
Yeah.
but obviously because of your experience and knowledge in the space and outside the space, I think the ultimate question is, where were we in substance abuse and mental health? Where are we now? And where do you think we're going to be going?
I got into the business 30 years ago, and there was nothing competitive because there weren't that many treatment programs. There was a diversion program where you went and threw up and said, there was sick and charter and all those, which were bizarre, not 12-step based at all. And then you had your Betty Ford and your Hazelden and a few in between, ASAP, which was a really good program in Van Nuys Hospital. And so I think that everybody wanted everybody to get well.
Yeah, that must have been such a great time.
Well, it wasn't. I mean,
Well, in a sense of,
there was no adolescent care. I mean, you went into a lockdown if you were mental. That's the way it was.
Do you feel there wasn't any adolescent care because parents were intentionally ignorant about their children's mental health?
No, I don't think there was addiction anywhere near what it is now with adolescents. I mean, I think 12-year-olds were probably still playing with dolls. Social media has blown up
Everything.
the whole society.
Why do you think that is?
Because nobody can keep a secret. I didn't want my parents to know what I was doing, for God's sakes.
Right.
And now you've got these kids that are getting high and I mean, actually literally dying on social media. And,
Literally dying.
Yeah. I don't think, of course, I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Kansas, and, it took a long time to get anything there. But this was the 60s, and they were still behind the times when I graduated from high school. And I don't think I smoked pot till I was 19. And, I'm an older generation, but, I got all these older musicians that started it, but their music hardly got to Kansas.
It's interesting, right? Because I have this debate with my friends all the time. Right? The culture of friendships and groups of friends has changed significantly because of the internet and because of social media. Whereas I remember when I was a kid, we would go out in the street and play on bikes and soccer and fall down and bruise up and bleed. And so there's activity, and now people
and you got home before dinner time, and
right.
Yeah,
if you're lucky. So
I got home for dinner time.
Yeah. So I feel like that plays a factor into it, right?
I had a friend who had a younger sister who was certainly not mentally stable, and she had an imaginary friend. And, I kind of dug it. She wasn't any trouble. You didn't have to take her anywhere and talk to her all the time, didn't argue. I thought, yeah, that's not such a bad idea. But then the world is made up of that now. These kids that play video games and they don't even know each other, and the dating thing. Oh, my God. My daughter went on a couple of those, and I just had to follow and, have a gun ready. I don't know how you trust people when we are a group of liars. And I didn't grow up that way. I mean, I got punished if I got caught lying. Only thing I ever lied at was confession because I couldn't remember how many times I'd lied. So it was like one of those things where, the older population, the respected parental guidance, no such thing.
Not anymore. Yeah, that's nope. Fascinating. I mean, it's participation awards.
I think a lot of it started when there were two families that had to work, and you had these latchkey kids.
Right.
And video games put a whole new twist on life. And social media. I mean, this TikTok thing is a whole generation.
Right.
That's the bee's knees. If you're not on TikTok, then, who are you? 16-year-old, one of the big girls in TikTok, 16-year-old just killed herself. A lot of pressure. Not all these kids certainly have addiction or mental, but they have such enormous egos. To vilify everything that you think about yourself and you perceived, and living it up to other people to know that you're not that, then it's a fraud. So, how do you go? How do you measure any of this, I have a whole theory as far as I met a young man about 4 or 5 months ago, and he's 17. He's been in 8 treatment centers. And he's now just kind of phonetically smoking pot constantly, which is a psychosis into itself. But this kid is, he loves treatment. He loves going away. There's no responsibility.
Sure.
He doesn't get any shit from anybody. And, and I said to him, really? He said, well, yeah, do you have a clinical diagnosis? That's the first thing he said to me at the intervention. I said, yeah, I do. He said, what is it? And I said, full of shit. That's my clinical diagnosis for you, buddy. I said, you have turned into such a brat that it doesn't matter how you get attention, but you got this other brother and sister over here who are making straight A's, one of them leaving for college, and all they get to worry about is you and spend every last penny on you to try to get you well, and it's a game.
What was his response to you being brutally honest like that?
He flipped me off.
He flipped you off.
I said, that is so threatening. God, keep it up.
Do a lot of the clientele that you work with respond well to brutal honesty? Or
no, but I have to tell brutal honesty to 17-year-olds.
Yeah.
Because maybe they don't know they're full of shit. Because their parents don't. And it's like, you're going to go to treatment one more time? Really? Where would you like to go? Oh, you'd like to go to Colorado because they're skiing. How about going to the desert?
So what would you tell the parents of a child who you view as full of shit?
Get your shit together.
So you see it as modeled behavior from the parents?
No, I think it's fear.
Fear of what?
Fear of them looking bad.
Fear of the parents looking bad. So, and I love this topic because I often feel like kids become these identified patients. And
it's the parents.
And it's the parents. It's parents not wanting to look at themselves.
Well, I would have to say that majority of the interventions that I do on a young person, young adult, anything under 20, I intervene on the parents. The kid, I can get to do anything.
I'm so curious how you do that and your approach with that, because I've done a lot of family groups. I've worked with a lot of families myself.
So do I now.
Yeah, and it's an art form because you can't go in guns blazing at the parents.
And you can't mirror. this is who I am, and this is who you need to be, because they all have a different story. And I do a wonderful adolescent parent group on Saturday mornings with Lynn Peterson from One Recovery. The amount of mental illness, the amount of suicide ideation, the amount of self-harm, and they always start out with this: my child doesn't have a problem with drugs.
It is unbelievable the denial that exists within families. And also I find it's not substances. Like right now, so many adolescents are self-harming, and no one wants to talk about that.
It's more rampant than it's ever been, and there's an awfully lot of treatment centers that will not take clients, young people harming themselves. I just had it happen, and, the treatment center didn't even know what was going on in the treatment center.
So I am someone who has recovered from self-harming. And I love to be honest about this, because I cannot tell you how many clients I've worked with who struggle with addiction, and then they get sober from addiction, and they either had self-harming tendencies or behavior before the substance, or they started doing it after. And that was my story as well.
After.
It's after. And it's frustrating, because if parents want to stay in denial, your kid is going to suffer. And I'm curious, why do you think parents want to stay in denial? Is it because they want to avoid their own pain?
Well, let's ask an average parent if they're in their teens. They don't give them a bath, or, they don't watch them shower. They don't know they're self-harming. The majority of self-harm is, other than your wrist, unless it's really suicide ideation, and then it's always your neck. But what did self-harm do to you?
For me, it was an escape from pain. It was, I'm going to alleviate the pain for seconds. Because with emotional pain, there's this feeling of powerlessness.
Yes.
With physical pain, I can control it. And so
to a point.
To a point. But even if it's, and that's what people are looking for, I think, at the end of the day, is this sense of relief from emotional pain.
But it's also an endorphin high.
It is a total endorphin high. And it would, honestly, and I know this is a heavy subject, and I'm glad we're talking about it, because for me, that was harder for me to quit than alcohol.
Well, I understand that, because it was your dirty little secret.
It was.
And parents don't understand it. I mean, there's self-harm, and then there's self-mutilation. Mm-hmm. And I did an absolute heart-wrenching story on the show about the second or third intervention on the whole show. That was a self-mutilation. Wow. And it came from an incestual situation. Mm-hmm. She only cut herself with broken mirrors. Mm-hmm. And it was very sexually graphic. But she wasn't trying to kill herself. She was trying to kill the pain from the incest.
That's right.
And it was her grandmother.
I really want to take advantage of it, since we're already on this topic. I mean, if you'd be able to give pointers or suggestions to somebody who's watching, who doesn't know or is not watching their child take a shower, it's what are signs? What are things that they can be on the lookout for?
If you had a psychiatrist, the best psychologist, the best adolescent specialist in the whole world, the person that can answer that better is Rachel, because she's had that interior trigger in her soul. You can't explain it to parents. The self-mutilation thing with this girl was that she bled, and she wanted to make sure that she was still alive. She would have, she'd almost have cycles with it, depending on her mental condition. They were born-again Christians, and they thought it was the devil, of course. So I can't get into that with people.
I can understand the feeling of wanting to be alive, because often with trauma, you disassociate from the body in order to survive. And so then it leaves you with this feeling of numbness. And so when you feel numb, you don't feel connected to anything externally, and the only thing you feel connected to potentially is your emotional pain. So then you cut and you feel something. And
it also goes along with eating disorders.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think we never recognized that just your average young teenage boy has an eating disorder. There were hardly any place you could send them that they would take them. You had a lot of obesity, but not real anorexia and purging. And of course, here once again, we've created that. You got to be thin. You know,
Sure.
the rumor has it that Jim Morrison did not die of a heroin overdose. He died in a bathtub that he would sit for hours because he would go back to France and gain tons and tons of weight, eat everything that had butter on it and butter alone, and gain maybe 20 or 30 pounds. And he was getting ready to go back on tour, and he went on the heroin diet. And there were a lot of really skinny young guys that were on billboards, that I'm not going to mention their names, that all got onto heroin to be able to not eat.
Wow.
You know, because they didn't want to be, couldn't be really speedy. And, you know, what's a diet pill? You know, to this generation, there isn't really too much.
Right.
And there's Adderall.
So do you feel that compulsive behaviors are a way to control the pain?
Yes. I think, you know, when kids get eating disorders, I was talking to a mother the other night, and this is a boy, and she said, oh my God, he's in the bathroom throwing up. And I said, is he sick or does he have bulimia? And she goes, well, I don't know. And I thought, okay, well, maybe you do need my help. But, you know, I mean, really good treatment centers, as far as I'm concerned, are going to watch you changing and shifting deck chairs on the Titanic. Whether you're going into an eating disorder and shopping, that's huge. And anything that's an outside plastic surgery.
Oh my God. Well, body dysmorphia just runs rampant.
But that is an eating disorder, is that
Absolutely.
body imaging, but we don't call it that.
I think this goes back to the question that you...
Outside job.
Yeah. Well, it's like when because Arthur originally asked in the beginning, where were we in the past and where are we now with mental health? Where do you think we are now with mental health?
Well, I grew up with a brother that was severely bipolar, and this was in the 50s. Thank God Meningers was in Topeka, Kansas, because he did get good help. But it certainly fractured. He was adopted too. Certainly fractured my family. I truly believed as he got older, because mental illness is progressive just like addiction, I thought that he was a really good actor. I thought it was, you know, kind of to get all the attention. Well, you know, I'd have none of that. Yoo-hoo over here. So my acting out was much more prolific as far as barrel racing and on a horse. And, you know, I mean, it was like Junior Olympic swimming. It was like I wanted the accolades from something I did instead of my behavior.
Because if you got the accolades, what did you feel?
I could take credit for it.
Right.
Not where I came from, who I am, who my parents were, Bob and Jenny's daughter, you know. Which I loved being, but you know, I didn't meet up. You know, Bob and Jenny, they adopted this lovely girl, and I never wanted to be a lovely girl.
Right.
I wanted to be a kick-ass broad who you wouldn't mess with.
Yeah,
And,
I understand that, and because we're on the topic of adolescence, you know, recently I did an interview for Beverly Hills High School.
I did the sober lunch there for 11 years.
Oh, wow. So they have a podcast there now, and it's they have this new incredible program there called the Wellness Center.
Wellness Center.
Oh, you know it.
I kind of thought
With
about
Allie?
it. I started it a long, long time ago.
With Allie?
With the Maple Center.
Oh, with the Maple Center.
Well, because it had to have somebody supervising me.
So it was it was literally this week that I was interviewed by their podcast, and I was crying on the show because that program was not around when I went there. And I so wish it had been, because I was suffering so much as an adolescent. And I think we briefly brazed over it earlier, but how do parents connect to their adolescents? What are some ways that you feel, because I have a lot of friends and colleagues who have teenagers, and they say, well, my kid just wants to go into their room and be on their phone. They don't want to connect with me. Like, do you think a part of that is true?
What are they connecting with? I think that I said this to a mother about a year ago. Nothing irritates me more than would you like to go shopping and lunch? Really? That's all you got? I mean, to dress them up and make them look cute and or go have sushi. It's like that isn't any intermingling or any spiritual work with a kid. You walk in and say, what the hell is going on? Or you go in your room with them.
Well, I think it's interesting, right? Because you see that a lot of times parents, and speaking as a parent myself, and trying not to do these types of things, they try to make their kids do what they feel comfortable with doing at that moment, rather than asking the kid, what would you enjoy doing, and what do you have fun with?
Well, you have to make them go.
Right. So, like, for instance, my daughter loves to dress up like witches and fly around the house together with wands. So we put on wings and we fly around making noises.
I love that.
And so it's like, but instead I could be like, oh, well, let's just come with me and we can go watch TV, or we can, go drive around to the supermarket.
Watching movies,
right? And so I think it's so too often, because of the work stress environment, because of, whatever the culture that we live in these days, parents are exhausted and they're tired. And so when kids come to them and say, like, I want to play or I want to do things, if you hear enough of the times, I'm tired, I'm not interested, I can't, I'm working, I'm whatever.
Well, and who's become the world's greatest nanny?
Right. Yeah.
TVs and video games.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, you think about Columbine, and you think about all of those, and Sandy Hook. You think about all those tragedies. All those kids never shot a gun until they planned this whole thing. It was all kill them on video.
Right.
I've done 2 interventions, one completely out of this crazed, on video, addiction. And now, by the grace of God, there's Don Grant, who is a master. I gave him his first job. He's a master genius.
Yeah.
I hired him
Brilliant.
as a tech.
He's brilliant.
But there are 4 of them. There's one treatment center, and it's just for boys. But when I was growing up, and even my daughter, we didn't have 11 princesses and all, $400,000 outfits and the red cruise on Disney that you spend $500 or $600 on outfits for. That outer extension is just separating us from, the real spiritual work. It's been a long time, even though I'm very active in 12-step. I don't see a lot of parents that took their kids, maybe on Easter or something, to church. Of course, I was made to go to church, but I at least had a foundation. They say the least amount of activity in a church is Sunday school. When I get it, Sunday,
You're tired, you're exhausted.
Yeah, and Catholics they'll go to church on Saturday, for God's sake. That's when confession is. Because I want a day off. So I think that we are, and I think the pandemic just put the icing on it.
Yeah.
100,000 deaths from January 20 to 21 with opiates alone.
Right.
100,000.
And that kind of leads me to the the third part of the first question was, where do you think we're going with everything? Obviously, with COVID and with mental health on the rise, treatment kind of where it's at.
Well, I think there's more severe mental illness right now than there's ever been.
Right.
And I can say some of it is linked to addiction, but mental illness is now considered OCD, ADHD, dementia. It isn't just your bipolar, schizoid.
Depression, anxiety.
Yeah. Anxiety. How many kids have anxiety?
Right.
How many kids are on medication? And nothing is tested on an adolescent, pharmaceutical-wise, because it costs them 4 or 5 times what it does to, get an FDA. But they're handing them out like candy. I mean, I have not met, well, maybe 1 or 2. I don't know, though, who haven't at least tried Adderall, that are either in college or high school.
And parents are doing that when their kids are like 7 and 6 and 8.
I had a mother just tell me at 11 years old that her daughter was diagnosed with bipolar. And I said to her, give me that guy's name.
Yeah.
And this is what's frustrating to me.
I said, that's impossible.
I've heard even 5-year-olds. I mean, like,
oh my God.
Parents that just... I don't know if it's an excuse because they just don't want to deal with it, and they're just trying to find a reason just to put them on something so that they can just walk away and say, get rid of it. And I'm like,
no, get them medicated.
Right.
But can you speak to what he just said? Do you
Yeah.
think that is one of the main reasons?
Yeah. There's
Just
families
fix
that
them.
ring a bell for you to come get your meds. But they
I mean,
don't
it's
know
just
what to do.
unbelievable.
They
don't know what to do.
what to do.
And they think that if they just fix the kid will.
Well,
they'll-
that makes them look good.
Yeah, it makes them look good. So it's like they're trying to preserve their own self-image, and really, it's trying to control and manage their own anxiety.
Absolutely. So here we are. We're in Los Angeles, California. You give birth to a baby, and if you want them to go to a really good preschool, you have to sign them up within 3 or 4 months.
Insanity. I remember that.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I have to now think about, okay, if my son wants to go to Harvard, I need to start figuring out the preschool he wants to go to now. I don't think that
All
way, by the
those
way.
feeder schools. So, well, I have 2 children. I would say at least $400,000 to $500,000 is what we spent on them.
So there's so many outliers. It's unbelievable. Because my wife is originally from Belarus and she lived in Israel. The level of education in Russia is like 10 times higher than it is here.
Anywhere.
And right. And so like when she came here, she understood the language. Obviously, she spoke a little bit of English here and there. She went to Birmingham High. She graduated as valedictorian.
Yeah.
I mean, after just being here for like a year
Well,
or
but
two.
she wanted to learn.
Right. Well, just the style of education, the quality of it, like how much
Must
effort
have
they
been
put
really
into it.
easy.
Well, to transition here, from an education standpoint, absolutely. There's just so many factors in play here. It's
Yeah. Well, I mean,
You
I went
lose
to a
track.
girls' Catholic school, and a lot of it was crazy. I mean, we spent weeks on the Pope, which wasn't going to get me anywhere. But it kind of kept me tuned in, so I wasn't crazed. But there wasn't drugs or alcohol, and me growing up.
There really wasn't.
No.
So how do you think that has now developed into what it is today? Are there just more drugs now?
Oh, my God, yes.
And there's Craigslist because people are now buying fentanyl off Craigslist. And this
Well,
is the horrible thing about the world we live in now. Is
I didn't have anything escape. There wasn't any reason for me to escape. I got up. It was a beautiful season. There were 4 of them. I went to school. I came home. I hung out with my friends. I rode my bike. I had a horse. I mean, what am I running away from?
sounds like a great life.
And I, had dinner with my family every night at 6 o'clock, unless they had liver and onions, and then I'd lie and say I was sick. And I mean, where was I going? It's like, and all the shows were Ozzie and Harriet and Make Room for Daddy, and I mean, it was all a life that existed. It wasn't made up shit like it is today.
That's a
Right.
really interesting line you just said. It was a life that was existed and
Yes.
not made up.
I mean, I watched.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, I
really
mean, it's
good.
just like, there's Ricky Nelson. He was 3 years older than I was, and he was cute, and but his dad went to work, and his mother wore an apron and a dress. Every time, when they, when the father would come home, she would be in a dress and an apron making dinner. It wasn't, although my mother didn't cook, we had maids, but it was like it wasn't so far out of reach to believe that you could look into somebody's life and go, oh. And I'm sure there were many poverty areas and stuff that didn't have it, but there wasn't an 89% chance of the father leaving.
That's not the real statistic.
Yes, it is.
Really?
Yes.
As a whole, in general,
Yes.
regardless of culture, background, area,
Well,
living.
it's mainly in large cities.
You're kidding.
No.
Wow. Over what period of time?
Usually 5.
By 5. It's unbelievable.
Well, my kids went to private school. When my daughter went in, my daughter's 42, when my daughter went in, myself and one other family, 2 other families, were the only ones married out of a class of 30.
Wow.
So you had my dad, my mom, my stepmom, my stepdad. And so at parent meetings, I'd think, God, these people have, 4 parents.
Like I I love this conversation.
Well,
we can go on for hours about this
you
type
name
of stuff.
it.
Yeah. I do want to curtail it back to obviously your specialty and your wisdom in the space of substance abuse and mental health. And
My resentments, right?
well, I'm trying to beautify this conversation. Obviously, you're very well known for your experience and in the intervention world, and so I'm curious, what led you to want to become an interventionist? Like, what inspired you to start this?
It found me. Lori.
Mm-hmm.
It's always friend. Right. She lived across the street from me, and she said, my kids were going on. I probably had, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years of sobriety. And she said, let's go to UCLA and become drug and alcohol counselors. And I said, what? She said, oh, yeah. I said, let's go get sushi and see a movie and tell them we're going to school. I mean, that was, But I had an undergrad degree, and she had been an actress, and she only had a high school degree, and she is the most magnificent learner. I mean, she ended up getting her PhD.
Wow.
But and I went, okay, how else am I going to get out of the house? I can't, it sounds good to me. My kids were young.
How old were you at the time?
52.
Wow.
No, 48 when I started. I was 52 when I graduated. I got straight A's. I'm certainly ADHD, and I got straight A's, and the reason is I knew the topic. And I was fascinated with pharmaceuticals, and I loved all of it, And I went to work at Charter. I got my hours at Beverly Glen Hospital. It was like for free, 3,000 hours. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of hours. I got sober May 1st of 86, and in June of 86, I'd met a man named Buddy Arnold, and he was trying to start a musician's assistance program, because when most of us got sober, and particularly all the musicians, there was no help. The union didn't help at all. No way, shape. The union didn't have insurance. So Mike was lucky enough to have, SAG and AFTRA, so we did have really good insurance, but
I miss SAG. I used to have SAG and health insurance. It was so good.
Oh, it's so good.
So good.
So it's like we started having a picnic, musicians' picnic, to raise funds to put people into treatment. And we'd get treatment centers to give us a good deal. And I'd say we spent maybe $5,000 or $6,000 on somebody. And then we asked that they do community service when they get out. Well, who was going to go get these people? Me. Because now all these musicians that were loaded are now sober, and they're out on tour. So I volunteered. It was at the Musicians Union. My husband and David Crosby were very instrumental in starting it. And I'd go to these people's houses, and this bedraggled wife or girlfriend would come to the door. And I'd go, hi, I'm here from Musicians Assistance Program. And they'd go, get in here and get this shithead. It's like, wow. And I'd go, oh, you're not going to help me? And she'd go, get him out of, And so I started doing mini interventions without knowing the name. I did a huge band that was very well known, and the lead singer, so I had to have the band in the intervention. Wow. To say if he didn't go, he couldn't work. So that was how it all started. And, I would just go over and go, are you really pooping on the couch? Wait till I tell people. You're you got a big reputation. Because I married the man, not the job. I didn't really know anything about music. Right. Other than Dolly Parton. And so it was a perfect fit for me, because I didn't know anybody was, and I wasn't very impressed with them. And I had a lot of great stories, Great stories.
Did it feel fulfilling?
I didn't know what fulfilling was at that point.
That's honest.
I knew they might not die, because by that point there'd been the Mama Casses and the Hendrix and the Tommy Bolins, and I mean, it just kept happening, and I would go, don't these people know that heroin kills you?
So at that time, were there a lot of interventionists?
No, there were 2 women interventionists.
Were you one of them? Two other women.
Yes. One of them was a woman named Joanne Toll, who lives in Crawford, Colorado now, and the other one was Pat Kelly, and she was a Christian interventionist.
So for people that don't know what an interventionist is, could you define what an interventionist is?
Somebody that comes in and ruins an addict's life.
The family system sometimes comes in and ruins the family. The addict's
Well,
life.
it's a
That's
person
good.
that comes in and interrupts a family, because it's a family disease. It interrupts a cycle of not knowing what to do, and having them look at their part, having them hopefully get into Al-Anon, having them hopefully know that they didn't cause it, they can't cure it, they can't change it, but every time that they open their mouth and give them money, they're killing them.
When you say it's a family disease, can you explain that?
Well, we have a designated patient, but how did they get there?
And I think for parents that are listening out there, this is not about blaming you.
Oh no, you can't blame them because they didn't take the drugs. They didn't take the alcohol.
Yeah, I always tell clients that I work with, because often children are so loyal to their parents. They want their parents' approval and love so badly. They never want to say, okay, my mom is a bad mom and my dad is a bad mom. Sometimes they do. But I often find that when I say to them, how did you learn the behavior growing up? If your parents were these teachers and you were a student coming into the world, where did you learn what you know
that
today?
behavior?
Yeah, where did you learn
Lying,
that?
cheating, and thief? Well, we'll see. Because the kids are the secret keepers. My daughter certainly was with me. But nobody made... you don't pour alcohol down somebody. Now, I know an awful lot of parents that smoke pot with their kids. And I just shamed them. I don't know what else to say.
You shamed the parents?
Yeah.
How would you do that?
Well, I'd go, you smoke pot with your kid? Tell me why. Do you know about an adolescent brain? Do you know that what you've just caused them is to feel so differently that they're going to chase it for the rest of their life?
Is that shaming, or is that bringing clarity?
Well, it's shaming them because they're not getting the same thing out of it the kid is.
Right.
And it's a bonding technique.
It is. It's sad because it is they're trying to connect to the kid, but they're so disconnected from themselves that they don't know how to connect
Well, I
to
had
the
this
kid.
dad go, well, can you imagine going to Disneyland and not smoking a joint? And I go, as a matter of fact, I can. What made you think your 14-year-old should smoke pot before he goes to Disneyland?
Well, what do you say to the arguments? I'd rather have my kid do drugs with me than do it on the streets on their own.
Great question.
Well, I'd have to say, I'd like to take you to the street. I'd like you to see what the hell you're doing to this kid.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of people down by the Greyhound bus station that didn't have any parental guidance.
The sad thing is, this is such a generational problem. It's like when you become a parent. Like,
Well, they don't want to be parents. They want to be friends.
Right, exactly. But at the same time, it's like, again, when you become a parent, you're sitting in the hospital, and this magnificent situation happens, right? And it's just beautiful, and it's emotional.
And then it's downhill from there. No, I'm kidding.
Well, depends on who you ask. But
that's been the biggest joy of my life.
No, but I mean, there isn't anybody just standing there that's like, oh, here's a handbook, and if you follow these steps, you'll be an effective
and
parent.
the more you read, the more it doesn't come true.
Right, exactly.
Somebody said, what books did you read when you were pregnant? And I said, well, I got through one chapter, and it scared the shit out of me, and I thought, I don't want to do this.
I mean, I'll tell you something even funnier. I mean, we read an entire children's names book, and we ended up picking up a name that wasn't in it. And it was like 500 pages, right? So it's like, you can't read about this, which is sad and funny, right?
But you have wonderful Russian names that people can actually remember.
Because they can't pronounce them.
Well,
but
neither can they Irish. I was going to name my daughter Fiona, and my son,
That's a beautiful name.
and my son Seamus, and they were calling him Shamu.
Yeah.
That's a whale.
Yeah.
Shamu.
And so, I went,
Thanks for the
okay, I got
clarification,
to back
Rachel.
that up. And then I was going to name my daughter Briar because that's a patron saint of song and my husband.
Right.
And I ended up naming him Bridget because that's the same patron saint
right.
of harmony. But in Ireland, there are no seconds and thirds.
Right.
everybody has their own
Individualized
so
name, right.
my son is Kelly Patrick Finnigan, and my husband was Michael Kelly Finnigan. So you join the people up here and down there, and you get a name.
Right.
You know, but I didn't know there were going to be 1,000 little girls named Kelly,
Right.
because that is such a masculine name in Ireland. And he's got 5 girls, you know, in his first grade class that have the same name. So he's going, why'd you name
It's such
me
a stressful process, right? Because you have to like think of all the bullying that could potentially happen with your child's name. And I mean, I can't imagine like the, you know, kid's name is Umbrella.
Well,
like
by the way, my name was Candy House.
Candy House.
There was a kid in my elementary school with the last name
Wow.
Poopus.
Yeah.
Poopus.
That's interesting.
It's really sad.
I lived next door to Crystal Chandelier of the Learjet.
You're making this up.
Of the Learjet family. No.
Oh,
and
my.
King David. No, I'm not.
Oh my gosh.
And
Oh, real?
Jay Bird lived 2 doors down from me. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
give it
well,
up.
Well, now you fuel it with social media and then forget about it. I mean, that's why people change their names these
Well,
days.
I used my first legal name, which is Heather,
Right.
and my maiden name on social media because, you know, I had 5,000 or 6,000, I mean 14,000 people on my Facebook, and I'm not going to put my kids playing
Yeah.
downtown theater, you know. So and finally, you know, because I had a little picture of me with my horse when I was 5, and so everybody thought that, you know, what is a small child doing on Facebook? And they finally got tuned to it. But I cut the social media off quickly
Good for you.
because of 4,000 or 5,000 letters every 6 months.
Wow.
Why won't you help me? Why won't you get me
Oh
on
my
the show?
gosh.
Why? What made you not answer me? And I got it originally because A&E made me, but they were maintaining it, you know. They weren't really giving questions and answers. But I did give the general number, you know, to where you could apply if you wanted to be on the show. But make sure you know what you're doing.
That must have been so difficult for you, knowing that you come from a place because you love helping people and you're
Well,
doing
I'd
this for
say
the right reasons.
95% of everybody that went on that show was so lost.
What was
Right.
your intention for creating that show?
I didn't create it.
Well-
I became one of them. It's when you meet somebody, first of all, in recovery, and second of all, who's authentic. You can really see through people in the darkest hours of their life. And I just made sure that they were very clear that I was the voice and the feeling behind this. But then I brought somebody much bigger than I am into that room to help them. Love and God are not going to save the person that's dying. You are, by acting differently. You know, they'd go, you know, we prayed to God, and I go, and He brought me you. Here I am.
Wow.
And I don't mean it in any other way other than it's incredibly spiritual work to me. I mean, these people are dying, you know, and I have to say to them, you can baby them and bury them, but don't call me. And many times when I've got a really tough one, I'll just say, let's calm down, let's quit the arguing, get a piece of paper, get a pencil, I'll hand it to them, and go, let's plan your funeral, because you should have everything you want.
Wow, that's profound.
And I said, so what's your favorite flower? And please don't, you know, No Tears by Eric Clapton. That's been done.
What is typically their response to
Yeah.
that?
They have none.
It's
Are they in
such a-
shock?
Yeah.
Amazing Grace is some of them.
Amazing Grace is usually the #1 song.
Well, I mean, if they've been at church, you know, I mean, these kids usually went like yesterday or something, like some, you know, Metallica thing or something. So it's like, I just say, because there's no way out of this. You're not going to stop. You're only getting worse. And, but I will tell you that the consequences for you not going today, I'm going to make sure that everybody sticks, because I don't write letters. I do statements.
Your process, what goes on in your mind? How do you stage it? Like the basics. What does it look like to bring you on board on a case? And what's your style?
Tell me the truth, and then I'll teach you how to lie to your kid long enough to get him in there.
Wow. Wow.
There you go. That was, again, simple but amazing.
I mean, I've had people go, very well-known actress come here because, they want to talk to you about a script. Any parent in the world, we'd like you to come over. We have birthday money for you. Whatever.
Oh
Whatever
my
you
God.
can do.
I remember when my parents did mine, I was so devastated because they knew how to get me. My parents are divorced, but they're still best friends. And I was sleeping at my dad's house. My dad's like, hey, we're going to watch 24 together. Just me, you, and your mom. And I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. I love 24. Watched 24, woke up the next morning. Hey, do you want to have some breakfast together? Yeah, sure. I'd love that. And then they just laid down the hammer. I'm taking you to treatment. And they had to lie, or I would not.
Oh,
and
of course.
They had to lie by having that family experience for me because I love being with my family.
Oh, but I've had great situations. I had a woman that walked in and she goes, is it my birthday? I went,
Yeah.
it's your birthday.
It's your rebirth.
It will
It's
be
the
in a year.
rebirth of you, I've had people go, who's that guy? And the guy would go, I was married to you, So it's like, I could write a book on the hilarious things that have happened.
I can
And
imagine.
people walking in going, I thought you were dead. I said, no.
Have you ever had people be violent with you?
Yes, but I left 2 treatment centers. When I was taking them to treatment, I knew that one of them, I had found out that one of them had a knife. I had, had them searched. And this was before we got to the airport. I let people get high before they get on a plane. I buy them their last drink. I'm not God, just getting them where they need to go. And I don't want them to start going through detox.
It makes you emotional that you say that because
I don't want them to start going through detox.
yeah.
No, I respect that 100%.
too.
I mean, that's
They go, you're going to buy me my last drink? And I go, and then,
because your job is not to save them for that next 3
$80
hours.
later, this
Right.
girl goes,
I'm ready.
I think you've had your last 1,000 drinks.
So when you work with a client and their family, you are typically the beginning of their treatment.
Well, I'm the introduction to their help.
How long do you typically stay in communication with them after they go to treatment, residential treatment?
Well, the parents or the loved ones, I usually have a closure situation. I don't send people to any place that doesn't have good treatment because I don't want to have to follow them and hear all their bitching and moaning that, the food isn't good and I don't like the girls standing. I send them to some place that can handle treatment.
What do you think a good treatment center is? What do you think they provide? What do you look for when you send a client to a treatment center?
Really good medical detox. I like medical detoxes that are on the facility because once they feel good, such a little chance of getting them to the next level. So, like Betty Ford has the Ottenstein Center, and they detox you there. And the same thing with the Meadows and other places. It's not always possible, but if you go to detox and you start feeling good, why do you want to go to treatment? You got to get up, go someplace else, start all over again. I absolutely insist on gender-specific treatment. Really important to me because I think women have much different issues
Couldn't agree with you more.
than men.
With gender-specific programs.
And who's the next victim when you go to co-ed. I like people who really know what they're medically doing as far as detoxing benzos, and because it's not a 7-day turnaround.
Do you feel that people get money hungry who come into this field really genuinely wanting to help people, and then they start making a lot of money from the work that they're doing, and then they lose all sense of morale?
Well, I have some other thoughts, too.
I'm sure.
A nice kid who parents have money, never had a job, might have gotten out of high school. Maybe yes, maybe no. And they're now sober 6 months, and let's get you a sober living. Let's get you a treatment center. We're off and running. There's an adolescent treatment center that the guy just sold it for $1.1 billion. So
Unbelievable.
So
it's big money.
yeah.
if they go to a treatment center and they feel it was successful, like what type of care do you think they're getting?
90 days,
90 days?
repetition, First month, teach them the 12 steps, teach them about, the anonymous programs. Second one, have them start working them. But this isn't the only time you're going to do this. You've got to get a sponsor. I'm not a big component of getting a part-time sponsor if you're out of the, city, or if you're in another state and they go, you can get, a make-believe one, and then just get your own.
And what about for the people that don't do 12 steps, or they're opposed to it? And what are the other options besides 12 steps that you find are beneficial or helpful?
Buying a horse. I don't know. I mean, I think that there are some decent ones. Modern management, or whatever that was, where you could have 2 drinks on Thursday and 4 drinks on Friday, and the woman ended up being drunk and, killed a daughter and father and ended up in jail and went to 12-step. I don't think there's any such thing as moderation of anything. But I think that there's some programs, I'm sure, that can help. They just don't have a spiritual component.
So you were saying anything that has some form of a spiritual component. So there's refuge recovery. I mean, there's celebrate recovery.
I don't think that they're proven as much as AA. But here's the real truth for me. I don't want a treatment center that is run by 12-step. I want them to have the philosophy.
I love that.
And principles. I don't want anybody to have to go to 12-step. I was just talking with a treatment center. They said, mandatory 12-step meetings. And I said, my good fellow, that's against all principles and traditions of AA. And he said, what do you mean? I said, you have to have a desire to go to a 12-step. Yeah. Nobody can make you do anything. And when you do, it's because you don't have a program.
Yeah.
And do you feel a program is a way to keep people accountable to their personal growth, to their spiritual elevation? I think that it gets you off the street. It isn't. It's easier to get high in there now than it used to be. Yeah.
I think it lets you be not so isolating. Lets you be with a bunch of people, like, you don't get to brag how good or how bad you are. Although it is difficult if you're an older person and an alcoholic and you're rooming with a 21-year-old heroin addict. I would like you to be able to, at least try to get a community.
Yeah.
I think you're taught things. We did the thing where this is a disease and you're not a bad person, you're a sick person. And I'm okay with that, but how about you're mentally ill? I mean, you don't get up every day and almost kill yourself and you're stable. And then, eventually it came around that this was a brain disease, but it wasn't before. It was totally a physical and psychological.
Right.
So I think that they need to know the facts. I used to love the treatment center that took them to the morgue.
Wow.
But 50% of 60% of everybody in there was an overdose. Homicide, suicide, drug overdose. And they all mainly had underlying drugs, alcohol. But they don't do that anymore. And jails. Visit a nice jail.
Right.
Sit around with those
experiential
fellas.
Therapy.
Well, reality.
Yeah.
But kids don't get arrested. Like, nothing happens like it used to.
Especially in L.A. these days.
So you can't get any shock treatment out of it.
Right. I'd be fascinated to get your opinion, because obviously, you mentioned in the beginning that back in the day when treatment was just in its infancy, it was a cash pay environment. You live in a world now where 95% of people in treatment are utilizing insurance.
And every 3 to 10 days, they tell them that they have to leave.
Right.
So who do you have in conjunction that is going to appeal and appeal and
Absolutely.
appeal and appeal?
One of the main reasons we actually hired a physician in-house, because honestly, being an in-network provider with a lot of carriers, we're constantly having to fight and convince.
Well, Betty Ford is now a 14-day treatment center.
And
then they move over to Daisy Lane, which is IOP,
right.
and sober living. They're not even really interested in fighting the fight.
Yeah, we fight the fight. I mean, we're a minimum of 30 days in residential detox minimum. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
And then the outpatients 6 months. So for me, it's how can we be better in fighting the insurance companies for better coverage. But now you tackle on, right, because you're talking about finding the community-based programs, finding a higher power, spiritual belief,
Listen, there was a
connection.
family in Bel Air that both their kids were on Medi-Cal.
Right. So now I'm going to throw a screw into this plan. Okay. So you have, let's say, United Healthcare was one of the largest insurance providers.
Yes.
They look at the statistics and they say, we're not getting anywhere with this. Let's start pushing out MAP programs. And unless you offer, and I know you're ready to answer this, unless you're ready to offer a Suboxone form or maintenance program that's methadone based, Suboxone based, Vivitrol, whatever it is that you end up using.
That's an interesting thing, I'll tell you.
Right. How do you balance the philosophy that you have, which I agree with, and now you have somebody on the line at an 800 number that's telling you how this patient's treatment should be run?
I was in the very beginning of buprenorphine when it was being smuggled into the country. And it was working.
Think about that.
I was the first recovery ambassador to Alchemy's pharmaceutical company in Boston. It's now in Ireland, for Vivitrol. I set up their whole pharmaceutical sales force and everything, and everybody had to be in recovery.
Wow.
And they did all of their original testing was for alcohol, and they did it in Russia.
You're kidding. Great test subject.
Mm-hmm. And then when the opiate came in, it was basically naltrexone, and it didn't last 28 days. It lasted 21. They paid me really well. I took a shot. It didn't get high. I went to the pharmaceutical place in Cincinnati. I was did a ton of training, and it would have worked. But just as it started to really work, now they want to take it into prisons. You know, and it just, they couldn't stay little to get big. They had to get big, and then it insurance pays for it as long as you're in a treatment center. They don't pay for it if you go to a doctor.
Right.
But back east, they have Vivitrol clinics, and it's paid for. But it's like $400. Who's got $400?
Right.
How long do you stay on it?
Right.
What is the average?
$400 if you're lucky.
Well, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But is it a 6-month program?
Right.
Because Suboxone was a 21-day program.
Right.
You had to be trained by a doctor who would give you Suboxone. You could not dispense it if you had not been through this training, and they had a whole bunch of incentives.
It's unbelievable. So I mean, I started really. There's about, I think it was a couple of years ago, I checked. There was about 960 Suboxone approved physicians in the state of California.
There were 11.
Yeah.
In the country when it started.
Right. None of them had a clue. They were very excited to meet with me because they were like, oh, wow, so we can work with you in providing therapy to our clients who we're putting these meds on. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, we can actually create a cohesive relationship. But 98% of the doctors I talked to had no idea about anything that had to do with mental health.
Oh, God.
And they weren't offering any support to their clients. They were just writing
offering
the
a drug.
And here you go. I mean, it's just fascinating. And that number is going to be growing and growing.
Well, so that was the thing. You know, you had to wait till the train was going to run over you, and then you'd get Suboxone or Subutex.
Right.
Now they carry it in case they can't get a drug.
Right. Fascinating.
So fascinating. If you had a magical wand.
I do have one.
Okay, fantastic. Is it Harry Potter?
Is it no, it's pink and it has sparkly things on it.
Oh,
there you go.
It's probably the one your daughter has.
Yeah.
I thought it was the one from Harry Potter World at Universal Studios.
They do sell wands.
Oh my God, it's the best.
Yeah.
I guess so.
I always pass it around at my groups.
Oh, I bet. What kind of group do you do with
Well,
that?
I mean, I did adolescent groups for years, and I'd go, okay, here's a magic wand. What are you going to do with
So
it?
what do you want to
that's
do with your
amazing.
magic wand to the mental health industry?
I want to provide enough good care at a reasonable price and have incredible follow-up.
This is the frustration I have is it's really hard to provide really good care sometimes if you don't have money. So what do you do for those people that don't have money?
Go to D.D. Hirsch. It's a wonderful place.
And maybe I can actually...
And I got to tell you, River Community is primary mental. It's all Medicare, and it kicks ass.
Do you actually believe that? Do you believe that you have to have money to go to some place that is helpful?
Well, tell me, because when Reagan was in office and let 1,650 people go with 2 days of medication, some of them are still living on the streets of Los Angeles, you get somebody and you give them medication, and how long till they go off of it? At least 3 weeks, they're gone. And they don't titrate themselves down. I would love to have a mental health center. It could even be named the Finnigan Center. I wouldn't object to it.
Oh, let me write this down.
And I would do nothing but really good assessments. So you don't have somebody who is living off the quandary of I'm bipolar. No, you're taking Adderall and benzos. Same thing, bipolar. So I think that to get a really good assessment, and then when you do spot neurological problems, that you get an MRI. I mean, a lot of older people fall and bang their head, and then it looks like dementia. It's alcohol dementia. There's opiate dementia. You know, what are we doing about that?
So you're saying a problem right now is the assessments are not complex enough?
Or, I don't think they are. It's 20 minutes.
It drives me crazy. I had a male client one time, and I'm not a doctor, okay, but this is...
Well, I think I am.
Okay, fine. It's just frustrating to me because after doing this for 13 years, it's the same story, it's the same pattern, and it's exhausting to experience because they're not getting the correct treatment, and they're being diagnosed with
Over the phone.
But within 20 minutes, this male client was diagnosed bipolar with borderline personality disorder. And I often find in this...
And it sticks to them
it
like
sticks
Velcro.
to them. Because there's
Forever.
a part of them that goes, oh, yay.
Finally
And
found an
I
answer.
can never, ever get out of this. An interesting story is I had a 62-year-old woman. She was a drunk, like, you know, she'd been drinking for 40 years and she could still kind of walk. And so very reputable treatment center, and she had to do an assessment after the intervention. I was sitting right beside her, which kind of helps if you can do one instead of, weeks before. And she said, oh, I only drink 2 drinks. Well, I guess they were 58 ounces apiece then. She had 2 bottles of wine a night. And they said, well, you don't meet the criteria to come into our program.
Oh, my God.
And I said to this woman, I grabbed the phone and I said, what did you just say? And she goes, well, 2 drinks, she doesn't meet the criteria. I said, this woman just wet herself. She is a diehard alcoholic. I'm sitting with she and her family. I can't interrupt because of HIPAA the assessment process, and you just told her that she doesn't need to come in. Who are you and what is your name? She said, oh, my name's Vanessa, and I have a book here that I have to ask these 12 questions. And it's California state law. You have to do an assessment before they come in.
Yeah.
I don't work with anybody as an interventionist. I'll sit with them for an hour after I get them to treatment. And if they tell me they don't qualify, and I've done an intervention, and I know the treatment center, then I'll take them back home, or I'll find someplace else. But I'm not going to have them lie to you. It's like, who's doing these assessments? Or hiring the people that graduated from your treatment center.
Oh, yeah,
like,
that's-
3 weeks go by, and they get out, and they go to work for them. I think that you can have peers and you can have community that come in and talk to people and stuff that are newly sober, but I don't want you working there.
What would you
I'd
say
like
is the
a few
magic number?
credentials.
What's the magic time?
For treatment?
For us, it's 2 years of sobriety before you can apply for a job. Not alumni, just in general.
Oh, well, I want you to have a year's sobriety. It used to be at UCLA, you had to have a year's sobriety. I don't know how you proved it. I guess brought a year chip or something.
Sure.
To be able to go to their school. And you can have 20 minutes now. And as you can see, Ken Seeley has his new certification, and Sober College has a certification, and it's weekends, and every other Saturday or so. I mean, it's some dumb thing, and you're a KDAC.
Mm-hmm.
Then try to get a job someplace for 3,000 hours. We have enough. I always say, and what are your hopes and dreams? And I go, and don't say drug and alcohol counselor.
So I have my final question for you, and again,
We're having you back, Candy, by the way.
Yeah,
You're coming back.
Yeah, you're coming back because this is I can go on for hours.
Yeah.
Taking what you know now, taking the knowledge you've had, the experience, what you've seen, if you can go back in time when you first getting started in this space, what piece of advice or information would you give yourself?
Don't think you're going to get rich. This is not a job. This is not a career. It is your life work. And if you don't care about every single person that you come in contact with, get out of here. Wow. I'll show you the door. And get some intervention training that has to do with a spiritual connection of working with dying people. I took a hospice course. Really helped.
Where could people go to get really good?
The Johnson Institute is owned by Hazelden now. There's some reputable places, but you can take that 3-day class and hang your little, sign out that you're an interventionist. There is a few organizations that don't mean much. CIP is a certified intervention professional in that. There's a BRI, board registered intervention, that went bankrupt. And then people make them up all the time and give you certificates for them. But you, by spiritual connection, need to go and get your KDAC, not your RAS or your DAS or, for 3 weeks or whatever it is. Get some education and go to an addiction studies college and or one that has a course. Pierce is excellent with Alan Glass. He's a dream come true for me. And he won't teach intervention, but he has me come in every semester and explain it and do a mock one. But he said, I'm not teaching this in this school. Are you crazy? We got a nut, and because you don't have any criteria that you can turn people down. I would hate to be a minister and not believe in God.
Well, to speak to that a little bit, and then we'll wrap it up. But because I really want this podcast to be a place where people in this workspace can come and listen to and gain knowledge and gain support. Because unfortunately, I think there's a lot of unwell people that work in this field. I don't mean to say that to put people down. I have been very unwell in my life. I'm not a saint. I'm constantly doing inventory on myself to make sure I stay aligned to my values and my purpose. And I am constantly seeking my spirituality, and I'm in therapy constantly. But how do you stay mentally, emotionally sane? Like, how do you stay close to God?
Well, oh my God. I'm not kidding you, Rachel. I think I'm one of the luckiest people in the world that people trust me and they call me and I'm at their lowest possible. Can you help me? And I will never say no. I might not be able to. I had a woman call a couple of days ago. Her son is very, very mentally ill. And I said, but here are some numbers. I'll call them first. I'll be on a call with you so I can explain and blah, 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 blah. He's living in a tent in a park. And I said, and it's lucky that she does have some money, because then we can go out and try to see where he is, because he's been in and out of 5150s for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years. And so But, you know, she said, I just can't let him die out there. And I said, you're not kidding. I'm so grateful you called me. I mean, I work 24/7. The last couple of months, my husband was so sick, I had to cut it way back. By the grace of God, everything was really cut back for me, just so I could take much more attention of him and take care of him. But the truth of it is that, my God, I never dreamed I'd have a life like that.
What is something you do for your self-care every day?
Ask God to let me do the right work and think the right thing. I've probably done and you know, I don't, you know, people, how many interventions have you done? And I said, why would I know? I have no idea. I really don't.
Interesting.
I have no idea. What's your success rate? And I said 100%. Because if I get in your family, you're going to change. Getting them to treatment, it's not the success for me.
I love it. For everything that you've seen, for everything that you've done, for everything you've been a part of, the fact that you're able to stay so humble through this,
Well,
in an ego-driven
and poor
industry.
on top of it.
Well, you know, that's inspiring. So,
But, you know, that's when you asked me how I became. It picked me. Am I the girl that's going to keep a secret? Am I the girl that you're going to ask to come in their family and tell, and really, honest to God, air all your dirty laundry, and some of it's hellacious? Am I the one that's going to go in your family and care about you? And I don't want you, the person that you love, to die? Yeah, I am. How I got here, I got sober. I never looked back. I looked up, not down, and I knew I had to help somebody in a real strategic manner to be able to keep my own recovery. And recovery comes first to me. Not always. In the last couple of years, it's waned. But I go to 3 meetings a week because I don't know which one I need to be at. I still am a deep believer of the big book, that it has as a textbook. I wrote a book called When Enough is Enough, because there isn't any way anybody can't do an intervention. Right. And it's a comprehensive guide to doing an intervention. And amazing. There isn't any reason
Where can people purchase it?
Amazon, you can get it used for $1.50.
Nice. That's amazing. What a deal.
Candy, you are an absolute joy, and I honestly, I look at you as like a mentor. I know we're still getting to know each other, but I really appreciate all of your words of wisdom and everything that you just stay so loyal to your truth. And even though like people may get mad at what you have to say, I love that you say it anyway, because you're really someone that fights for people's lives.
Well, if I have to fight for them until they can fight for themselves.
Well, I love that.
That's beautiful.
And well, both of you are, heroes in this too. I mean, we have to be warriors at this point, because the war keeps coming, and I keep having to change the way I act and change the way I do, but I am never going to change the way I feel.
Yeah.
Because what if I don't do what I'm supposed to do? And the same thing with both of you. And, podcasts are a wonderful way of intervening on people without having to go through the process,
right.
Because it's a learning. Podcast should be a learning process that someone can listen to and walk away with it with a new idea or a new feeling.
Absolutely.
It's a wonderful medium.
I can't count how many people are going to be like super excited about this one.
I know. I'm very
And
excited.
she only says shit 4 times.
I
gotta applaud you on that one.
That was good.
You manifested that before the podcast started.
That's
You're
true.
I'm gonna watch myself. I don't know if you were watching yourself.
I don't like
really
bleeps,
good. No, we don't bleep anything.
I know,
here,
but
so.
Well, Candy, thank you again. I adore you. I love you. I appreciate you so much. And for everyone out there, thank you for listening to another episode of Got Mental Health with myself, Rachel Cove, and Arthur Mogilevsky, okay? And please go to Apple Podcasts, rate, review, and follow. And we look forward to your feedback. And next week we have a new episode. Thanks, guys.